Let me ask you a question. Now, this is
You don't have to ask me a question.
Today
Just
about
ask the question.
isolation.
Just
we're
ask
going
the-
to we're going to talk about isolation today, and so this is the one that I asked you about. I had read a thing about, they're talking about isolation on a long space flight to Mars.
Can we survive it?
Can we survive it? And then not only is it the flight, but then you're on an uninhabited planet, another world. I still, to this day, I have trouble spending long periods of time alone. I'm not good alone. I thrive on
social interaction.
Yeah. And it doesn't, and honestly, I was fine in COVID. I turned to my wife after 3 months of basically just being with her, and I go, this is good. I'm happy. I'm very happy with you. You're great company. But alone would be challenging for me. Are you good alone?
I'm really good alone.
Are you really?
I am really good alone. I don't have any trouble occupying myself. Like the fun of this show for me, believe it or not, is researching and going down rabbit holes to find it. Because every question, when you research something, leads to another question. I did that in talk radio for years. I love.
Were you in talk radio?
I love.
How long were you in talk radio? It's about 30 years.
When people say you're kind,
but you got to me about how I say, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm just saying. How many times do I have to hear?
Do it right.
When you were in talk radio.
Do it right. Say, "Can I ask you a question?" How long were you in talk radio?
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
I won't answer
rabbit holes. You were in a rabbit hole when I interrupted you. You were in a talk radio rabbit hole.
You go down here and you go isolation, and then you find out what kind of personality does well in isolation, what are the personality traits. And then one of the things I found out, and hopefully she'll know about this, is a nun. I was just telling producer Laurie about this. A nun who went to a monastery wasn't enough for her. She then went to a cave. She was in isolation, total isolation, for 12 years. And in 3 of those years, she slept sitting up in a box meditating and came out and was fine. Again, we haven't interviewed her
as fine as she was going in.
We didn't interview her friends who
there
would
was
go.
an obvious deterioration, but it wasn't exactly, quality meat going in is what I'm saying.
True, if you talk to her friends, they go, oh yeah, Elaine's fine.
Yeah.
But I want to know the personality type because our guest has gone to numerous places that are isolated. She's a research scientist that specializes in this. I get it.
Right.
But what's your brain that you go, this is what I want to do? And I constantly want to go to these places, which are challenging, isolated. It's dark for 3 months. There's no day. It's all night.
Right, yes.
And the challenge is that I don't want challenges. I don't even want to go camp. We used to camp when we were kids. If I can't plug in a hair dryer and a mini fridge and order something for a take, I'm not going anymore. So it always fascinates me, the people who climb things that could kill them. I had a trainer who went to ice climbing, ice mountain by himself. And I'm thinking, I know the chances of you coming back diminish every time you go. And he says, I know, but that's the adrenaline rush for me.
The thing that, the people that climb Everest, they talk about there's cadavers up there.
They're frozen. Right?
Yeah. And I go, do you know that before you go? Or are you climbing up and you go, what's that? Oh, that's Bob Schneiman. He didn't make it back in 1974. And you go, get me down. Let's go down now.
And they
I don't
have people
need to
who shouldn't be doing that.
If anything I'm doing requires me to pass corpses that have tried it before me, I can back out of that endeavor.
No. Although I got to tell you, from what I understand, when you're sticking whatever the thing is into the ice,
pick. It's called a pick.
When you put it in the corpse, it's in there.
Oh,
it's really in there.
Wow.
So you can use Bob Schmelman or what you said his name was to pull you up. Thank you, Bob. At least
still helping after all these years.
Right. Exactly.
A giver.
He has a purpose.
Always a giver.
Has a purpose. When are we going to eat lunch? When we get to Ernie
Heidi Menschken.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, right.
Unbelievable. I do well in isolation, but then again, it's not real isolation because I know somebody else is going to answer.
But what's the longest you ever been alone? Really alone?
Intensive care, but people are around. God, I don't know. I don't know how long I've been around. When people are on vacation, I'm home alone. But there's people outside. There's somebody delivering mail. I've never been in isolation.
Yeah, I would say, the longest was when my parents went away the first time and left me alone in the house for a weekend.
How old were you?
I was 16, I think, 15 or 16. And I did something stupid. You want to know what I did? This is no way to start isolation. Friday, they left on Friday morning, so I go to school, I come back, and the world is mine. It's my house. Friday night, I stay up really late, and I watch the original, I had never seen it, original Night of the Living Dead.
Oh, bad choice.
And I'm petrified.
Bad choice.
And I go up to the bedroom, and as I'm getting ready for bed, there's something in the basement. There's noises coming out of the basement, and I don't know what the hell it is. I don't know what it is. And what do you do? What do you do in those things? Every time we see people in horror films going to the thing, we go, "You idiot! You idiot!" Here I am. So I grab a kitchen knife and I grab something else, and I'm now standing outside the basement door listening. And there is something in my basement. There is someone down there. And I don't know where this came from, the adrenaline. And I throw open the door and I flick on the light and I yell out something like, "I'll kill you!" Trying to think that I would scare the psychomaniac that's down there. A squirrel ran across the floor. I had a heart attack and died. This is not me anymore. I died at age 16 outside the basement door. And, by the way, I was paralyzed for the weekend. I couldn't go to the bottom floor of the house. Didn't know what to do. Stayed upstairs, and somehow this rabid squirrel was going to chew through the basement door, find me, and attack me for calling him names.
So my parents did something meaner than that. We moved to a 3-bedroom home, and my bedroom had a closet door that had a door inside of it to the attic.
Right, sure.
So I'm a 6-year-old boy when we moved to this house.
Yeah.
With a door to the attic. Where does bad stuff happen in every movie you've ever seen?
Yeah,
the attic.
Yeah.
So if I want to get a pair of pants, or it's 2 a.m. and I wake up, I'm hearing noises from, whether it's a squirrel, a bird, or whatever, in my bedroom.
Yeah.
They're going to come down. They're not going to kill my parents. My parents are always going to go, "Oh my God, how did this happen?
How did this happen? Why travel?"
I would say for at least 2 years, every third day I'd say to somebody, "I'm not going to my room. There's something." And my brother moved out to college. He was 10 years older than me. Would they give me his room? No, they had to move furniture.
You might come back.
Right, we could rent it out. I lived in the room that was the gate.
That's bad.
That was the gate to hell.
Win.
I didn't sleep. You asked me why I don't sleep?
Yeah,
that started me.
Sleeping is death.
Started me on the. I'm doing watch now for 4 hours until I nod off, and the minute I nod off, I hear something in the attic and I have to wake up. So thank you to my parents.
All right. So today we're talking about isolation. Let's introduce our guest. Beth Healey.
Dr. Beth Healey.
Dr. Beth Healey, an emergency medicine doctor who's worked for several years in the NHS and a variety of international settings. She has worked all over the world in a number of extreme and remote environments. Svalbard, I didn't even know that was a place.
I looked that up to see if it was a joke, and they just threw that in. No, it's a place.
Yeah, Svalbard, Siberia, Greenland, Antarctica, the North Pole. She's a research MD for the European Space Agency. She has wintered in Antarctica at the spaceflight analog Concordia, otherwise known as White Mars.
Yeah, they recreate Mars. That's the closest thing. That's where they send people to see if they can hack it on Mars. And the big thing is, and we'll start this when she comes on, is the fact that I just read that with SpaceX, now their latest successful test, the headline was, with the successful test, this moves us one space closer to Mars. I mean, it's imminent. It's coming. So
good luck to all of them. She has researched the effects of isolation and extreme environment on the psychology and physiology of her crews, and she's been there. She's been in the trenches.
She does it. She puts herself through this voluntarily,
and so hopefully she'll join us, because I know she likes to be alone.
Yeah, they're luring her out with a piece. They got something on a string now, trying to get her.
So let's say hello to Dr. Beth Healey.
Really? No, really? Really? No, really?
So the big question
First, say hello to a person.
Hello, Dr. Healey. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. Thank you.
Great to see you. So Jason talked about.
I have to teach him manners. He's not around people a lot, Dr. Healey.
I like isolation, but not everybody likes isolation, but not, as Whoopi Goldberg would say, isolation.
Right, yeah, right.
It's an inside joke. But I wondered if we are built, man has evolved over the thousands of years to be who we are and live the way we are and adapt to our surroundings. We're asking man not to make a giant leap, because we're going to send you to another environment, and I understand it would be like a 3-year trip back and forth, whatever. Are we capable, from what you know, in studying isolation and living in isolation, to do that? Is that realistic, or do you sit back going, "Oh, are these fools?
This is never going to happen." Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting question, because, of course, as you say, like we are developing the technology required to take us on these longer duration missions. But I really do think that the biggest challenge is going to be the human side. And that's really what we were studying in Antarctica at Concordia Station, where I was working. So I was working for European Space Agency, and what we were doing there is really researching the effects of isolation as an analog for these long duration spaceflight missions. And it is really going to be a huge challenge to get us there safely with good mental health and as a well-performing team.
You got that smirk as you're saying that, by the way, which means you can spill the goods.
Challenging. Did you see the wink on challenging?
Yeah, because I should say, and I know you want to, but you've done this repeatedly at different places where you put yourself in isolation, and also where the environment's dark all day, where it's months and months of no daylight.
Well, just so people listening have context, when you go to Concordia, which is in Antarctica, is that correct?
Exactly, yeah. It's on the Dome Charlie Plateau of Antarctica. So it's kind of its closest neighbors are like Vostok and South Pole.
Right. Okay. And when you're there and you're embedded with these research teams, how long a period of time are you all basically in that kind of isolation when you're doing a research study?
So I went to Antarctica and Concordia for 14 months when I was there, and then the isolation period of that is like a 9-month period where you're overwintering. And so that's where we were the crew of 13 people for those 9 months, and we were considered completely inaccessible for that period, even in case of emergency. And we also, as you mentioned, had like long periods of long polar nights. So we went for 105 days without any sunlight at all.
So does that, I just want to equate that to the intended Mars mission. Are they talking about sending that many people in one mission, or is that considered a large group for a space mission?
Yeah, so that's a larger group than what's anticipated for a Mars mission. Although obviously, if then you start to get colonies, for example, on the lunar surface, or also for Martian missions, then it could end up being a bit longer. Like realistically, for the spaceship to get to Mars, that's a higher number than what we expect.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they're not just like relying on one analog program alone. So Concordia is specifically looking at long duration spaceflight, but it's also looking at it in the context of a real mission, in so much as to say that the crew in Antarctica are completely isolated in really extreme conditions. And so it's considered safer to have that number of people on that specific environmental platform. So that's why we have 13, not because it necessarily reflects what we would be doing for long duration missions, but we also do other analog platforms which more accurately look at the sort of size of the crew. So for example, Mars 500 would be a good example of that, where they had a 6-person crew on a simulated Martian mission, but that was done in a much more controlled environment. So it's done in like a Russian car park, essentially. So they sort of built a spaceship, had a crew of 6 people, did a fully like simulated Mars mission, and they had a lot more control over simulating, for example, kind of accidents happening, there being like emergencies for the crew which they had to deal with, and having that kind of like high fidelity simulation. But what it missed is what Concordia can actually offer, which is that real life danger of being in an isolated and remote environment. And so I think actually personally, I would have found it much harder to have gone on the Mars 500 mission, which is the car park one, because I think for me, like a lot of the stress that I had was actually during the summertime in Antarctica, where I still had the choice to leave. And it's actually really a stressful kind of period, because at that point you still have that choice. And so I spent a lot of that time thinking, is it a good decision to stay here? What's going to happen? Like, should I go on the next plane home and actually just quit? Whereas actually it was kind of almost like a relief when the last plane left and you suddenly were like, okay, I'm doing this. And your mind actually like psychologically switches to a different mode, because like you know that you can't leave. And so actually the worries and sort of anxieties you have are different. And so I think if I'd been in that other simulated mission, like the psychological challenges are actually quite different. So I think it's really important to have all these different types of analog programs looking at lots of different aspects to get you a much like broader, bigger picture.
So we're going to dig into this, but I just want to jump to the big picture question. In your professional opinion, are they going to be able to pull this off, or is this a hope to Christ kind of thing? Do you think, based on what you've seen and experienced, that there are enough people who could actually endure this kind of isolation and this kind of stress successfully and accomplish the intended Mars mission?
So I think we'll do it, but I'm not sure if we're ready yet. I think that's kind of how I feel. I think like a lot of these programs are doing really valuable research and like looking at the challenges that we're going to face and trying to put in countermeasures to try and help prevent those challenges that we've researched that the team are likely to experience. But I think that there still needs a lot of research in this area to help optimize the team most effectively, like in terms of team selection, preparing the team, making sure that you have the right composition of team and that you're preparing them well in terms of putting appropriate countermeasures in place and also monitoring of the team performance during that mission to make sure that it's successful. Like I think it's wrong to think that we can just, just pop a crew on a Mars mission without all of this training. But I think that there is a lot of this research taking place, like the Concordia platform, like Mars 500, lots of other research projects which are going on, and I think that these are really valuable, and I think that we really have to continue to do that to make sure that we're ready when the technology arrives, to make sure that we can safely send a team.
So Dr. Healey, what I got to know, and this I'm going to ask you a long question, has a lot of pieces to it, but A, who are you that you love going to these places? What personality are you? What does your family say? And as part of that, you got to pick the right personality traits for these people who are going. I mean, you got to make sure that they can live in that environment, that they don't have all kinds of messed up stuff going in. I mean, do you talk to their shrink behind their back? Do you talk to their family behind their back so that you know that that person actually has an accurate perception of themselves? And are the tests you give people to say, this guy's going to go, he's going to hit crazy about day 13? Because looking at us, I'm guessing... day 3.
Are you and I going together? Because it's day 1.
The beginning of day 1. It's who goes in first, who goes in second.
As the engines are firing, going, wait a minute, Peter's here.
I'm out. So yeah, if you can wrap that all into one, your personality, the personality traits of the people going, and how they test that, so you know, Louis going crazy day 9. I'm not going with him. How do you figure that out?
But that's it. I mean, and it's not only just, is that person okay, but are they in the right team?
Yeah.
As well. So it's like, so you could have 6 of the right people, but just not the right composition and like having clashing personalities. Boy. And, like when we went down to Concordia, like, in fact, our whole crew didn't even make it to Concordia because people were like deselected at the training stages. So we did lots of training before we went down there. We had like psychological testing and people were sort of deselected before we even made it. And I think that was really important for our crew. And it's going to have to obviously be even more strict to go on these longer duration missions. So I mean, it's interesting as well about like who is the good person, So in some ways you want sociable people because they're going to be able to get on with each other. Because you talk about isolation, and while you are isolated, you're also super in close proximity with your crew as well. So it's kind of this weird thing where you need to be sociable but not too sociable. That you're going to be able to get on well with the team, but then you're also not going to miss too much having that social interaction back at home. And so there's lots of different factors, and then it's also about understanding your crew as well. And so we did lots of training at the European Astronaut Centre before we went, which is sort of human behaviour performance training, and a lot of that was focused on really understanding how your crew react in different situations and how you react in different situations. And from having that better understanding and knowledge of how people react in these stressful situations, you're able to kind of predict how people are feeling before they might even realize it themselves. So just to give you an idea, when I'm super stressed, I go really quiet. That's how I react. And so if people notice in the crew that I've gone really quiet, they might pick up on the fact that I'm not feeling good, or like that something's up with me before I might even notice myself. And whereas other people, get much more loud and much more stressed when they're upset as well. I mean, that's a very basic thing. And then also, obviously, on top of that, you've got sort of cultural understanding as well, because it's probably quite likely that a mission is going to be a multicultural mission. And then also on top of that, sort of genders, how that composition is going to be, and nationalities and the cultural differences that come with that as well, all going into a melting pot. And so it's hard to predict at this stage what and who that mission is going to be. I mean, is it going to be a commercial mission? Is it going to be a governmental mission? Is it going to be a mix of everything? And which nationality, we don't really know at this point. But it's exciting to think about.
So I want to follow up on what Peter asked you, though. What is it, as far as you can assess, what is it about your emotional or character makeup that has made this doable for you? I mean, I understand that you're interested in this study, but you have to be in it in order to do it. So how did you know that you would be able to function like this?
It's a funny question that I get a lot, and it's not that I had ever really honestly planned to go and do it. I guess for me, so my background is I love skiing, and so that had taken me to lots of sort of extreme remote places. Like, for example, I've worked a lot in Greenland already. I've been up to the North Pole. I've done lots of kind of extreme environment stuff, and that really stemmed from a real interest in how our bodies perform in these kind of extreme environments, and also like high performing teams, sports teams, that kind of thing. And that's really what got me interested in the project. And I guess when I first spoke to ESA about the project, so European Space Agency, they were like, oh yeah, it's going to be like 9 months, maybe 10 months, and then suddenly you're there for 14 months. And I guess for me, personally, I really like sort of new experiences. I'd been really interested in Antarctica kind of my whole life, really. But the real thing that sort of clinched it for me is that I feel really passionate about exploration, and I really think that sort of spaceflight is the next frontier of exploration. And I think that as researchers, we can, while I'm very unlikely to be on the Mars mission myself, I think that when we do step foot on Mars, I feel that by having participated in the research and helping to sort of further our knowledge on this subject, it really feels like you can sort of be part of that. And for me, that's really exciting. And that's what really sort of motivated me to go down and do it.
So I'll ask this of you, but I guess you can extrapolate it into people who participate in this. So you said, I thought it'd be gone 8-9 months, and it turned out to be 14 months. What happens to all your relationships, your friendships, your parents, your siblings, your significant others, or whatever? I mean, if you're in isolation, are you allowed to be in contact with them at all, or are you? It's just all on hold.
It's a funny thing, actually, because so we did have contact. So we had really slow internet. So it's a bit like dial-up. You could go and put a web address into the internet, and then come back in 5 minutes with a cup of tea, and it would have uploaded. So you couldn't just browse unless you had patience of the saint, where it's just really slow. Having said that, if you pick the right kind of time of day, so we had a really limited internet connection, and a lot of that was used, sort of the bandwidth was used for uploading data. But if you sort of caught it in the middle of the night, you could get a really good Zoom call, for example, with friends and family back home. And you also, on your phones, you didn't have obviously any signal, but you did have WhatsApp Messenger. So you couldn't send any photos or anything, but you could text people at various times. But it was kind of weird because actually, I think if you were too much in touch with your friends back home, personally, it made me feel really homesick. And also you could get anxious about different things going on, world events and stuff, because you're not able to actually, if something does go wrong, if you have a friend or family member that's sick, you're not able to go back and see them. And so it was always a bit of a balance, some days it was really good to kind of take a step back, speak to your friends. It kind of put a good perspective of life in the station. At one point everyone was getting really upset because we had run out of paper napkins, and at the time it seemed like the biggest problem in the world. And then you call home and everyone's just what, Beth, what are you on about? It's really not an issue. And then it was actually really helpful. But at other points, you'd be sat on a Saturday night, with your friends going out in London, and you're just what am I doing here, sat in the middle of nowhere in Antarctica. That kind of made you a bit jealous. So I think it's important to have a bit of a limit. And it's an interesting question for long duration spaceflight, especially because if you have just unlimited access of communication to friends and family back home, then we're not able to monitor what's coming in, and so we're also not able to monitor bad news. And so historically on Antarctic stations, all the messages used to come through the station leader, and through that they were also able to monitor to some extent what information was coming. And so if there was, for example, a fatality, or someone was breaking up with somebody, then they would have a better understanding of what might be going on in that person's life, and also be able to support them through that.
Right.
You know, for
Jeez.
example, there was a guy who was like engaged when he came down to the station and didn't tell anybody that actually they'd completely broken up like halfway through the
Wow,
mission.
can you imagine? That's
Yeah,
like the
right.
joke. That's like the joke where the guy says your mother died. You don't give anybody that kind of news. All right, your mother was outside. She was warding the plant. She went up on the roof. You break it to
Right,
them
in
slowly.
stages. Yeah,
Right.
right.
Wow. So can you explain? Because this I found fascinating. Third quarter syndrome, and as it relates to, and this
Yeah.
is a touchy thing. I don't know how to ask it, but relationship stuff. You're with guys, and once you explain third quarter syndrome, part of that is aggression, and your mind changes, and if you've been out of society for a while, and this is your society, you don't really have somebody giving you feedback on what's appropriate anymore in society. It's whatever this society you created says is appropriate. So in a workplace, you do something, I leer after you or I say something sexual, whatever, you go to HR. What do you do?
Yeah.
What do you do in a guy with third quarter syndrome when people are getting weirder, and that kind of stuff happens and you're in total isolation? Who are you calling?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty wild, to be honest. But I guess in reality, I think actually people were more cautious about relationships and that kind of thing. Then, you know, it's not like you go out on like Saturday night and be a bit loose because you're going to see the person the next day and for the rest of the mission. So actually, I think if anybody like actually had feelings for someone, then they would kind of be a lot more slow, a lot more thoughtful about it. And I mean, in reality, there wasn't really that much gossip, unfortunately, in terms of relationships. You know, you're stuck with, you know, there's not that much choice of guys. So, but I mean, there have been relationships happening on Antarctic.
I would think.
And there's also obviously been breakups as well. So it is a difficult thing to manage, and I think crews do find it difficult. And there were obviously sort of interactions within the crew which were sort of based on that as well, which was sometimes challenging, especially as being a female down there, because there were 3 girls and 10 guys. So that's like quite a big
wow. Well, can you explain that as it relates to, so I mentioned third quarter syndrome. Can you explain to people there are things that happen at different points, and you need to be aware of what's going to happen at those different points, and it's pretty standard, correct?
Yeah, and I mean, third quarter, it was just like, it was really challenging. Like I was surprised by how challenging it was, because you kind of cruise through the first 2 quarters. And like, you know, the first quarter is super exciting. You're in Antarctica. For me, it'd been like my dream to go down there. And there's a lot going on. There's a lot to like keep you busy. You're like setting up all the experiments. And then you kind of come into the second quarter and you still got like little bits to do, but you're kind of getting the hang of being there and you're kind of getting used to it. And, you know, it's like when you go on holiday, you know, the environment feels kind of crazy to start with, but then you kind of get used to it wherever you are in the world, more or less. And then you're also going into like the long polar night, so that has its novelty as well, with like you know, first you'd like walk out the door in the middle of the day and it would be like you look at the Milky Way, and it was pretty special. It was kind of cool time. And then you come to midwinter, which is like, it's kind of like Christmas in Antarctica, and that time also is kind of nice because you're interacting with all the other stations, like only obviously not in person, but like over Messenger and stuff, and wishing each other like happy midwinter and like having celebrations as a crew, which are all kind of actually importantly all working together on the same task, which is actually really good for team dynamics, you know, having these like communal things that you're working on. And then it's over and everyone just feels completely lost. You're like exhausted. You haven't seen the sun for like over a month. You're like, you feel like you've been in Antarctica forever and it's still exactly the same amount of time left to go. And people just get really, really down, like really tired, really forgetful. Like I remember I would start, because of FT3 syndrome as well, you just get really forgetful and a bit confused, and like you'd be trying to put like the wrong shoe on the wrong foot, and
wow.
I would start doing a task and then I forgot that I've done that task and then start doing something else, and then like turn around and realize that like the centrifuge has been going for like hours. You're like, oh. So it was a really confusing time, and yeah, and everyone did struggle. That's definitely where a lot of the arguments kind of came up. And I think in terms of arguments, it was kind of interesting. I thought that it would be like more fiery because like I was on a French-Italian station. You've got Italians everywhere. You think it's going to be like a bit more hectic, but actually it was like this weird kind of nobody wanted to be like the bad guy. And so nobody wanted to be visually seen as being obnoxious or annoying or like as being mean to someone else. And so just to give you an idea, there was one person that didn't particularly like me on the crew, and instead of like being openly unpleasant to me, they would just like hide all my things constantly.
They would
So, like,
hide all your things.
yeah, so I'd go to go outside. Like, obviously, you need loads of gear to go outside because it's like -80 centigrade, really, really cold. And like, my glove would be gone, and you're like, "Where's my glove gone?" Like, and then the next day you go, and then my boot would be gone, and it would be like hidden somewhere in the station. It just drove you nuts. It was just like this weird, like, underlying thing going on in the station. It was just.
Are you then
and, like,
allowed to write down this man should not go to Mars? Are you allowed to report?
How about this man should not be out of his room tomorrow? He took my boots. What, are you kidding me? How do you go to the next day? See, if he did that,
It's
okay.
small.
It's small, except
thing to do, but it drives you crazy. You're like,
It's
you're
not
like, "Where's my
small.
boot?"
That's not small.
I will tell you, I can't even say on this podcast.
I mean, you need that. That's like hiding the toilet paper. That's not
And
small.
also, I would be thrown off
Somebody
base.
else hid all the chocolate in the roof as well. They,
Oh no!
like, 'cause
These are reasons for
Jason,
murder.
Jason, the
This is, you know-
retaliation that I would do, what they would find in that person's
Right?
bed when they went to pull
Oh,
the
you're not
sheets down.
kidding.
Oh
Yeah.
my God! So, but how do you keep? But if you're
You'd be
losing
like-
it, you're losing it. They're losing it.
Yeah.
Everybody's in what do they call third segment syndrome? How does everybody then say, "Hold on, we're all losing it. Let's have a dinner and work this out"? What do you do to have people?
Yeah. How
pull
do you
back?
get out of this?
Well, so I mean, a lot of work has been done on this particular period to try and improve it. And I mean, one of the biggest things which I just touched on there was about having these team tasks, because actually as a crew, you all go down because you have your own skill or skill set, because they can't have many people on the station. They want to have as few people on the station as possible to make it all work properly. And so you're all quite individually quite different in terms of what skills you're bringing to the station. And so as a virtue of that, you end up all having quite different jobs and tasks on the station. And you're not often working collaboratively on lots of things. And so one of the big things that they found has been really effective in improving team cohesion is having these like shared goals within the team. And so there's a big focus of that during that period. And it's kind of interesting because like actually at Concordia, which is our station, the first overwinter, the station wasn't quite ready to be overwintered in. You know, like they had made the shell and everything, and they kind of done the basics, but like a lot of it still hadn't been finished. Like the kitchen wasn't done, the like sitting area wasn't done, and there was a big kind of question over whether or not they were going to winter or not. And in the end, they decided that they would, but that the crew would help kind of build the station during that winter. And it was actually the most effective winter that they ever had, because the crew were all like working together on all these shared tasks, trying to build everything and trying to make everything. And it was actually really good for the dynamics of the team. And so we try and like replicate that as well in future overwinters, to try and put these kind of artificial tasks in place where people will have to work together effectively for. And that's been found to be really useful.
So you said there was one person on the crew who decided that he didn't, you said, like you or enjoy you or whatever. But did they at what point did he realize that? I mean, would they have sent you in if they knew that somehow somebody irritated somebody going in? Is that part of the research? I can't imagine. I'm sorry to be this guy, but you seem like a lovely person. You seem very upbeat. You have a lovely demeanor. I'm trying to figure out what the hell you could have done to this guy.
You don't know her. You don't know her.
You know that Beth Healey?
I know, but
she's
you're
a monster.
You're assuming a lot of stuff about Beth. Beth could have been the worst one at the station. We don't know.
I mean, would they not have
They've been
screened for that or something? You know.
I know. Well, the chef actually from the winter before So he was like coming out of his winter when I was going into my winter, if that makes sense. So
Sure.
we had like a bit of overlap during the summertime. And he actually wrote to Isa and said that he thought that I was an experiment that had been put into the project because I was like a young girl and thought that it was Isa trying to like mess with the dynamics of the station and that I should be like removed from the program before we even started.
Hello.
It's kind of interesting.
That wasn't a red flag for Captain whoever.
They think it's like an
But he
episode of Big
left.
Brother, or
He
you
wasn't-
know.
So we got to wrap it. I got 2 questions. Do you have locks on the doors?
No.
Okay, I
Oh
think
my
that's
God.
But you have a
something I'm
private-
bringing. I'm
private
bringing a
bedroom,
padlock.
like
That's
a
number one.
private space.
But I also wonder too about the anthropomorphizing, if I got that right, like in Castaway. I understand with like seafaring guys who are lost in sea and whatever, they start doing that. That Wilson the volleyball is not an unusual story. That when people are
Yeah.
lost at sea, they start writing back that me and as far as you actually to keep your sanity have projected a personality.
Yeah, so when I arrived during the summer, the overwintering crew from before were just leaving, and one of them had like, so all the fresh fruit and vegetables and everything comes in during the summer on the flights, and one of them had like found like a lettuce leaf with like a slug on it, and like it kept it as like a pet because like I was like, this is so nuts. I like come from like London, like but actually, like by the time I got to the end of my winter, I could kind of relate to it because like. It's strange. Like at Concordia, there's no plants, there's no other animals living. We haven't even found bacteria to be able to survive in the environment outside because it's just so extreme. And so you just get this weird thing where like everyone's kind of the same age, more or less. Like you don't see old people, you don't see young people, you don't see any animals, you don't get to like jump and submerge yourself into water because it's all frozen. You know, like if you like throw a hot cup of tea outside the window, it vaporizes before it hits the ground. And it's these weird, simple things of life that you really miss, just like the smell of trees. There's no mud or dirt or anything like that. And so maybe you didn't, to the same extent, sort of make objects in that way, but also I think there was I'm not really spiritual as a person, but when we saw like the Southern Lights come for the first time, it was like the first time that something new had come to the station in like months and months and months, and it felt like this kind of like weird visitor, just like having this kind of light just like shimmering above the station. And so there is something different and there's something special about being there for sure, and which makes you kind of trip a little bit, I think.
Can I it's your area, but it's slightly a different subject. Since your research is taking you into isolation, do you have a sort of basic response to the notion of subjecting people to solitary confinements as a useful tool, or is it always inhumane? Is it something that you think can be used well, or is it just something that should be taken out of the sort of correction of human behavior programs?
Yeah, I think it's hard to justify. Like, I mean, I wasn't ever on my own. Like, I was in close proximity with a very small amount of people.
Right.
And while sometimes that drove you a bit nuts, you didn't feel completely isolated. And I think for times like when I wasn't around people, like I think, to have been in Concordia Station on my own would have been a very different experience and not one that I would justify for anyone.
Dr. Beth Healey, thank you so much.
Are you going
Thanks for
back
having
into
me.
some sort of crazy situation, or are you done with that?
We'll see. I'm always somewhere remote, but maybe not. as
And if you
remote
see the
as
boot
Concordia
stealer,
again.
if you're out and about in warm weather
if
and
you
you're in
see a
Palm
glove.
Springs and you see the boot stealer, do you go? I mean, do you go, you know something? Right now, right here, we're going at it right now.
Thanks so much. Yeah, no, I'd go to the moon. You take me to the moon. I think that's probably as
All
far
right,
as I'll
all right.
Oh, you would go to the moon?
I'll
Wow.
go with you to the moon. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, with me? Yeah. Don't wait for me to go on that mission. If you want to get there,
He's
don't
scared
wait
of
for
heights.
me.
He's not even going up to the capsule to go into the
that would
thing.
be the worst part for me, is going
Getting
up to
into
the
thing.
capsule.
There's no way. There's
Yeah.
no way.
That would be the
Well,
worst.
good luck. I hope you get your dreams and wishes, and maybe we'll talk to you after the moon mission.
Sure thing. Okay. Great stuff.
What I got out of this segment is there's no, we ain't making it to Mars.
Well, the other thing I wanted to ask that we didn't ask is, would it be better or worse if you sent actual couples, or if you sent very close friends.
Oh, it could.
Is it gonna help the situation, or are they gonna fall apart?
An actual
under this
couple,
kind of
I'm
stress?
guessing would kill each other in the first third because they're already annoying each other. But my sense of this is Elon Musk, no Elon Musk, technology, they may have it all figured out. We're screwed. Because what you're going to hear, I'm thinking is, hello, Mars rover? Rover?
Here's the other thing. This is a real thing. I understand
I'm
the
serious.
excitement of exploration. Listen, if we suddenly are sending a mission to Mars, I'm going to be listening to that story incessantly because I think it's fascinating. But what are we doing? What are we going to get?
This is what I told you.
What do we get?
This is what I told you. If you sit back and listen to our series of podcasts, and I urge you to, there's been some pretty interesting ones. The theme seems to be that people who know stuff and the real wealthy people, they're building their own town somewhere. They're working on spaceflight. They're getting out. They're trying to get out. They got a memo that I don't think we're entitled to. The wealthy guys.
If I have
they
to
all
get
talk
out
each
to a
other.
place where I need to manufacture the atmosphere,
But here's what I'm saying.
I think I'm
Here's
just
what I'm
going to bite the cyanide capsule.
That's how bad it's getting that they're willing to go to a place with no air.
I just don't understand. And they go, well, we have to get to Mars to get beyond. Beyond is worse.
And I'll tell you something else. You're my closest friend in the world. We've spent over 30-some years. We've spent a lot of time
Sure.
together. I love you. We've gone through stuff, and I'm being very serious.
Yeah.
We've been through a lot of stuff together. Yeah. And we've annoyed each other and we talk to each other, and we hold no grudges, nothing. You're in that thing with me, I'll kill you.
We haven't shared a hotel room, you and I.
I would kill you.
You're in the room next door.
Your mother, you hid my sock? I'm stabbing you in your little head.
Can you imagine? You hid my glove, I can't go outside?
Because things that annoy us now,
I can't go outside.
We joke about what annoys us now, and it's part of our friendship.
Right.
Month 5 in isolation, it's over. Where's Jason? I don't want to say.
Yeah.
Is that his blood on your shirt? Could be. Guggenheim, what do we got?
I have her glove.
And we're out. Good night, everybody.
Well, first of all, I do, because I think this is a fascinating topic that actually we've dealt with before. We had Dr. Joseph Tuturi on, as you might remember, who was living underwater,
Yes.
dealing with pressure
in the
underwater.
Florida
So it was-
Keys, I might add.
You know
Yes.
what?
With a guy swimming down to serve him dinner.
All right, you know
but
something?
okay, go
so
ahead.
it wasn't David Blaine embedded in ice, okay? It still did it.
Well,
He was
it's true.
wonderful.
It's
I was sold.
very-
I was sold. The man lived underwater.
May I say?
For 37
Don't
days.
knock
Yeah,
that-
but with a,
That was a
I said
wonderful-
it
It was
right
20
to him.
feet. It
I
was
said
20
it. Did
feet
I not say it
underwater.
right to his face?
Yeah,
I said it
and
right
by
to
the
his
way,
face.
how wonderful
His
was it?
mother came down and visited him.
By the way, the only thing that upset him in the episode was I gave his mother's age, and he said, you got to edit that out.
Yeah.
But by the way, a wonderful episode if you want to
Right.
check
But
it
yes,
out.
what was your point there, David? I'm sorry.
No. It's just it's. But one of the points that he was bringing up in that episode was the composition of the crew and the psychological stress.
Sure.
testing
Yes.
Yeah.
That and I think he was. I think he was making the point that was one of the biggest mission critical things you have to solve before you worry about the radiation or the thises or
Yeah.
the science
Shrinkage, anything,
of getting the human body to Mars or whatever.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So there you go. But because we've been talking about isolation,
Yes.
that made me sort of think about, well, what's the opposite of that? Like, what are the pressures of being in crowded rooms? Like you go.
So you found
to-
somebody who's been to 300 performances of Cats?
No, that wasn't what I was thinking. But someone who goes to an amusement park
Okay.
or to a concert or a club or whatever
right.
it is, I think we all have this sort of this feeling of our social battery being run down, right? You're like, oh my God, I gotta
Too much
you
input.
know, I gotta sleep. So anyway, so I started looking into this, and there was some interesting research done in the University of Helsinki.
Okay.
That's saying that that there's an introvert extrovert thing where extroverts are more able to deal with these crowded situations because they often feel fueled by the interpersonal,
Okay.
wrangling of all that type of stuff, while the extroverts are like, oh, I whatever, and the relationship to that with the human body is as far as it goes back to dopamine and how your body is being fed dopamine. And the extroverts, of course, feed off that, while the introverts don't.
Right.
But at some point you wind down and you're like, I can't take any more of that, and that's sort of the mechanic that goes on when you're like, my social battery
Interesting. Okay.
has run out. So there you go.
By the way, you didn't have to give us any of that because you had us at I have.
Yeah, I have glove.
I know. That's what I'm going to edit it out.
Can't top that.
Boom,
Can't top that.
boom.
I have best glove.
I do know some pretty, a couple of introverts, and I wonder if it works the other way as well. If an introvert, who craves solitude and craves
Gets dopamine or gets what, serotonin?
gets a dopamine, but also what their breaking point is of going. This is exactly the other thing about I need people now.
Dude,
'Cause,
I gotta tell
her
you.
situation was she was never alone.
To your question, which was interesting, then we got to run. Prison, Kenny Whitmore, 36 years in Angola in a 6x9 cell. And he 23 hours a day. The longest, Albert Woodruff, 43 years. And he said, I was hallucinating. I wanted to cut my balls out and throw them through the cell, which he said other guys have done in isolation. But he got out and he's still coherent. But I don't know how. One of the tricks that I read about was if you're future oriented, if you're always thinking not about here's where I am right now, I'm locked in here in my head. If you could think about the future constantly, it helps you do it. But I could, like to your point as far as prison, I never understood the isolation. What does that punishment do to somebody? Why are we doing that? And what do we hope to accomplish?
It's prison is what we do with timeouts with children. If the thinking being, if you can't be
social.
if you can't behave yourself around people, we'll keep you from people. But that may be a punishment. I don't know that it teaches anything.
That's like when I said when you get a dog and it craps on the rug and you push its nose in it. After 800 times, doesn't the dog crap on the rug and go, I'll save you the trip and go push its nose? What are you teaching? Teaching the dog. So going in the corner is taking them out of a social situation instead of sitting down and saying, what are the other choices
the thinking
you
now
have?
is from child psychiatrists is that the timeout thing is
not working.
Pretty much obsolete. It doesn't really work. In fact, what people are showing now is that when a child is really acting aberrantly, that one of the things to do is to hold them, to hug them, and say, "Tell me what's going on. Tell me what you're feeling. Tell me what's happening." But this sense of if you can't behave yourself, you can't be around.
Removing
us,
you from society.
It's
weird.
Is not particularly helpful.
Well, thank you, David. Thanks everybody else for listening.
And thank you, Dr. Beth Healey.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.